Hey, greetings and welcome to Code Quickie. And today we're going to be looking at E2E testing with Capybara and Angular. So first things first, I just wanted to say to everyone, Merry Christmas. And there's been a lot of I've made me personally how I reflect on this year as I've made a lot of progress as of late. When it comes together, when it comes to putting together applications, I feel like at first there's just so much that goes into it, but now things are repetitive. And I just wanted to also just talk about my two favorite frameworks, one for building web platforms and others for testing them, doing E2E tests. And I also want to mention that we also do unit tests with Capybara as well. Want to do that in another video, but there's a certain feature with Capybara that will allow you to be able to do unit tests with JavaScript code, and something that allows E2E to happen so easily and facilitate the process. I rather have the same with Unit if they are offering that solution, right? Or if that's something you can see without really having to really lift a finger, as you're going to see later. So let's first get into it. What we have here is just a simple, it's a little form, it's a little app. We give an Angular app, right? Say we built out our form, and now what we just wanted to go ahead and do is get some testing done, right? So what we have here is amazing about Capybara is first I just want to go into the configuration at the top level, right? So this is the E2E file where all the magic happens, and Capybara, right? Really uh, it's a DSL on top of Selenium automation. Well, Selenium is the actual software that automates an end user for you, right? So you're able to test, so you can program it to execute end user commands and see how they would result in the browser. And browsers have their own drivers so that the Selenium end user, right, the Selenium robot end user can interact as an end user using the drivers that the browsers provide. And we're going to be looking at Firefox. You can look at Internet Explorer, right? This is very nice about Capybara. Internet Explorer, we're talking about Edge Legacy. It's the Edge browser. If anyone's familiar, this is going to be Edge Legacy. I think the new one is Chromium Edge. Chromium Edge, that's what they're going to name it. Edge Chromium Edge. Um, so there is that. And that's what's nice about Selenium, right? And everyone's asking, where's Google Chrome, right? It's going to work just as fine with Google, right? And then also at the bottom of this demonstration, I also have the documentation to read more on Selenium, Capybara, and RSpec, that in the third, and how to really get things going. Because after this introduction, you really understand what Capybara is all about. So what we have here is just our configuration, and the configuration is amazing, right? So if you need to gain access to Selenium, you want to be able to look at some of the login output. We look at Selenium log, right? We placed it here in Selenium log, and let's head over to where that would be, right? That's the library I was just going through. And really, what thing I like about Ruby going through its gems folder compared to no modules is that you end up finding what you're looking for when you're dealing with the Ruby's version of no modules. Like if you're trying to see how to configure something, if you go in there, it's much more smaller, right? It's much more smaller. Right? These are libraries, and these are libraries you're always going to ever need, right? You're going to need if you're looking at to configure things, where you're going to look in Capybara, right? Like I said, RSpec, what is it? It's the expectation part, right? You're going to be looking at RSpec. REST client is a good library, right? You could learn that separately without need to know Capybara. Just definitely use it over the native implementation. And then we also have Selenium WebDriver, right? So definitely very good. And then we want to take a look at Node, want to take a look at the Node.js, I think it's going to, if I open up the mode modules for it, it's going to crash it. Yeah, you check, yeah. And then it just keeps on going and keeps on going. So all that just to get a web application going. Well, you do have to respect web applications when it comes to E2E, right? Not that much is needed, and not that much should be needed, and not that much is needed here in Ruby, right? So that was just the overview of just heading through the libraries. Now, right, we have our yeah, I never mentioned, right? So we say Selenium log, right? We get to see it in the relative path and all that juicy information, right? We can set the log level to debug. So we are seeing any issues. So we want to see any issues, how our tests are coming along, whether it's the whether it's the driver, right? Whether it's the Selenium E2 user, Capybara DSL, we'll get to, well, Capybara is acting on top of Selenium so that we don't have to deal with the frustrations of Selenium, which we're going to see very, very soon. We're going to see how that's the case very, very soon, right? Very neatly organized data, right? Something you really don't get, right? Just to get that Selenium log, right? Just that it's going to take a lot. But in Capybara, it's just one line of code, right? And then you can also change it to the path. I just wanted to do a little debugging, right? Right. So now what we have that's really amazing about Capybara is that people are saying a lot that it's a Rails, it's for E2E for Rails applications only, not really, not at all. It's a bold-faced lie, right? Capybara and Angular is there for a reason, because a Rails application is a web application. Capybara is not interacting with the code of the application. It's interacting with the UI, the UX. It's interacting with the browser interface. You set this to run server equals false. This wouldn't try to start up the Rails application. Instead, it would actually go ahead and give you and actually visit the host or the domain that you're actually working with. We're going to see that in the configure block, right? We can see these are my host, localhost 800 and localhost 800. There's this Angular app is running. I'm telling you, this is an Angular application, right? As you can see here, right? This is Angular, right? This is Angular syntax. I want to scroll to where I started, but let me cancel. Right? And then I feel like the load times when it comes to dealing with Angular, right? So working especially with Angular 11, right? But just wanted to restart things. Okay, right? So right, this is on the dev. Right, so now we have it up and running, right? This is Angular, right? This is just an Angular application. Everyone can see it now, right? So the idea that it's all about our stack. So let me just get into it, right? So that's our host, right? And now our drivers, right? We're using the Selenium. When we see Selenium here, it's actually defaulted for Firefox, right? So we have the Selenium driver. There's also the Edge browser, Internet Explorer, right? Google Chrome, right? Memory. I use this computer. I'm a full stack developer. I use this computer for things that need that memory for Google Chrome not to hog, right? So definitely, doing this in the VM would have been the better option. But I'm thinking to myself, I'd rather use remote cross-browsing testing, such as Lambda test, browser stack, Sauce Labs, right? And that is not going to be set up in this demo. It was really just a focus on Capybara and how easily things get done, right? So next thing I wanted to explain was default max wait time. This is another nice feature, right? So usually in our code, usually the end user is waiting for elements to appear, such as a submission dialog, right? Such as a success dialog saying that the user submitted their form, right? And we also need to wait, right? If we try to ask for Selenium for elements too early when they're not there, right? The driver's going to throw an error, Selenium's going to throw the error, and that's going to be the end of it. So you specifically have to stop the thread, and have it wait till these and estimate when these elements are going to appear. However, you can just uh, set a set amount of seconds for every single element that the test is waiting to appear with this parameter default max wait time, and ignore hidden elements. This is very nice, right? So because you can see on my screen, right, there's not every single element on the screen. If you try to zoom out, right, they start to come together for the app, right? We see that we can't get to the upload the files button, the submit button, and then this dialog that is dynamic that is going to change, right? When we say ignore hidden elements, right, what's happening is that by default, the E2E end user only sees this viewport. If that was set to true by its default, right, when we try to click on it, we try to select it, right, it's going to throw an error, it's going to crash it and fail the test. However, we're going to set this to false, right, so that we'll be able to see elements that, right, that are not in the viewport, not to say that their visibility is 0 or their z-index is like 5 z-index behind some elements, or their opacity is 0, or their display is set to none. Especially if their display is set to none, it's not meant to catch that, right? Because this is supposed to be realistically for end user. However, right, if it's out the viewport, Capybara is understanding, and mostly Selenium and the driver's understanding, that you don't want to write code just to scroll to the element and like so, but that's what's actually happening. You don't want the developer end user to write code, and so the developers with Capybara and Selenium, right, and Gecko Driver support that. So next thing I want to talk about is modifying the drivers, right? Because when these drivers gets loaded, when the driver gets loaded, let me head over to Firefox profile, right? So when a driver gets loaded, right, in the browser, so there's a lot of different factors that need to start at the E2E for E2E, right? So first we have the driver itself, which is going to be represented by service, right? And now if you want to just understand, right, the VB options for both, and one thing I like about this library, right, is that in Node.js, if you're looking for a configuration, you go through the Node.js node modules, right, you're going to have a very difficult time. But with Capybara, well, with Ruby, right, not specific to Capybara, but this is a Ruby thing with its gems, right, it really gets straightforward how you go about doing things. You look for service, right, you're dealing with Firefox, you eventually come across Firefox, right? And then you look in its folder, right? And then you see service, right? You want to see a service, and then it starts to become, as you scroll through, right, 53 lines of code, very, very nice. These modules are decoupled one from another, right? So there's more meaning than actual code structure taking place, right? Ruby was invented with the human element in mind, right? And the configuration can really start for you. If you don't really know how to gain access to it, you could just go directly in the service, right? And then say if you made an error, what you go ahead and do is you would exit out the Ruby repo, right? You would do bundler, or however you installed, right? Yeah, not bundler install, re-download, right? And then it will give you a fresh copy to work with now. So say for example, right, I wanted to change the port. I'm not going to change the port, right? But I'm not going to change the port. But if I wanted to, I can go ahead and I'll be able to access the port like that, like so. And then I think I wanted to show you one more thing, right? And then, right, say for example, if you were looking really finding what you're looking for here, right? It really just gets you just a bit of looking, right? You see another service, and more configuration, right? So Firefox, right? Oh, I see, right? This is the arguments that get passed to the Firefox driver, which is known as Gecko driver, right? I could go add an argument here. Obviously, I'm not going to do that right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm able to get that from the configuration. I is able to see that, right? And by that, generate a new driver setup, which is really a new session, right? When you see this, and right, you have a browser with all the options, right? Say if you want to use it for Firefox, you want to use a different profile, you could go ahead and do like so, right? Service, right? We want to modify a service, right? So we could get a verbose output to really get some trace logs as what's going on with Capybara, right? Right, and then as a lot of, and then right to the options that you have, and to be able to set them very simply with an object, right? You have all the resources listed again as well. So I also just want to go over the amount of configuration to really configure your session to get what you want out of it, right? All of that is coupled of and available for you. All right, so for that, right. So now, next thing what we want to get into, we talked about Capybara. We talked about how really easy it tries to make things, and we're going to continue to talk about that. We talked about Selenium. We want to talk about R spec, right? So R spec is really that expectation, is really the testing, is really the testing framework that's involved, because Capybara is not a testing framework. So Selenium is really R spec, is that testing framework that the developers chose to work with it. Very, very nice framework. What we just want to get into is we want to start to get into how testing is set up. So we have these features. So I know in Jasmine, right? I know in Karma we have describe and it, and many testing frameworks use describe and it, Mocha, that and the third, coffee. So yeah, described in it, but you know that you're working with a Capybara test, right? Especially R spec, right? When you see feature and scenario. So what you see feature and scenario, you know that you're working with Ruby, you know you're working with Capybara, and you know why things aren't working. You want to use the language of the correct framework. It's very confusing when you have different frameworks with the same keywords, right? The Capybara is a lot. Also, the Capybara is a two-edged sword, right? So we can also replace this with a describe, and I can replace the scenario with it. However, definitely like the feature and the scenario, that differentiation. So I just know what I look at as I go through big projects, right? And right, so that's really, and that's all to it when it comes to the actual testing for RSpec. Now, RSpec also offers lots of configuration at the granular level, just like Capybara. Just wanted to talk about the hooks, lifecycle hooks that we have here, right? So we're going, yeah. So as you can see, we're going to be using the Dropbox API. That's my um, that's my access token, which obviously is going to get deactivated, right? Or the project's going to get shut down. That and the third, just in case it doesn't get deactivated. Um, so obviously not worried about that. Everyone could see, everyone could really try to hack my account, but there's really nothing in there, right? And also, like, say we also have an after life cycle hook. Obviously more of this is going to be in the resources, right? So that after we can log out, and then log out, we do some cleanup, where it's going to be database cleanup, that and the third, right? So we could prepare the environment for the new test. And now really what's interesting here is when we go around, right, we're going through each example, right? That's what each scenario is, right? Where it's going to be a scenario or it, a scenario or it. And I know there's other terms, right? I think from mobile test, and there's definitely much more tests. But really, we don't get that at the names. You just want to know that our app is working at the end of it. There is, they're also referred to as RSpec as examples, right? And example dot metadata, right, is going to hold all the information that you're going to need about your examples, right? And now it will allow you to, and now you could even run, I have like a unless statement, right? You could run conditionals, right? If I'm actually working with the Selenium browser, right? If my scenario name, right, has files involved, right? It has files involved, right? We can go ahead and right, user upload files, right? We could go ahead and decide whether we want to go ahead or run that scenario, run that example, or we could go ahead and skip it, right? With example dot skip, right? We could say example dot skip if we didn't want to run it, and that at the third, right? Very, very nice, right? So also we see, like, also set for life cycle hooks for examples, right? There's life cycle hooks for the whole testing suite. When this testing suite, that means all the features and the whole test in itself, one complete test, right? We have like web drivers, we have Microsoft Edge Legacy, we have those web drivers, right? We get to do a lot of things, and then on top, coupled with really the ergonomics of Ruby, right? This becomes very, very powerful. So now let's get into the actual features after I talked about really some of the configuration and the metadata and the granularity that you have with Capybara. Let's just get into the actual features. Now, really, when you just want to visit a web page, can you visit a web page, right? I can get to the home page, right? I express that. Let me go ahead. I visit the home page, right? We want to visit it every single time. Can I get to the home page, right? I just wanted to mention that, right? These are life cycle hooks, but the actual test actually takes place in the scenario. So it's actually important for me to leave that there. I can get to the home page, right? I visit slash, and then also I want to work with just the Selenium. I want to show you guys how fast things go on Edge. Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer, if the Capybara doesn't make it fast, it makes things simple, but to make things fast, what you want to do with Internet Explorer is you want to download the, you want to first get the version of the drive of IE driver server that you're using, and then you want to get the 32-bit version, because if you try to get any other version, it's just not going to work. So, right, we get to the whole page, which is a one-liner. Right now, say you have some regression testing, right? You want to check out the sizes on mobile, eh, mobile, that and the third, right? We can check that out. However, let me just go ahead, instead of speak about it, let's go ahead and see how that comes together. Right, so you can see, right, I just wanted to go ahead and pretty print it. I just wanted to go ahead and pretty print, right? You can see all that juicy configuration data. They could just go in there and touch, right? Very, very detailed, very, very nicely, right? So now we're just able to get to the home page really on Internet Explorer 2, right? Try this with Selenium, might not be so lucky, right? But Capybara definitely takes all the issues that the developer, the source developer should be taking care of, not the developer end user. Right now, I just head over. Right now, you can see that resizing. Right, I should have maximized the window. Right, I'll just go ahead, cancel that out, and let's just maximize the window. All right, so we have, right, I was able to, so what I did was I said, where do I have it here? Page, current window, maximize. And then, right, so we're gonna have, right, we're gonna need to visit the page. Right, let's hover through stacks. Just want to say I could get to the home page, right? So again, to the home page, right, and now maximizing to see the full screen, right? Very nice. That was on Edge Legacy, right? And now just just see how quickly that we're moving. Internet Explorer, obviously, I'm using I spoke about the driver earlier in the video, right? They were just moving through, right? So it's just getting to the homepage at all, right? And making sure that's not down or we cannot connect. Obviously, this is a local host on your domain. Definitely want to make sure that that's the case. If we're in the test, right, and your, your app is not running like it should, then right, that's going to speak to that situation. And then say if you wanted to minimize the screen, like the user just wanted to resize the image, right? You're just going to test that out with Microsoft Edge. But sometimes, but definitely, as great at it as it is, definitely you want to make use of execute script. You want to make use of execute script in order to use JavaScript now, right? So what that allows is for the E2E user to execute JavaScript as long, not only just use the browser. As you see, I'm using window.resize2 in order to resize the window. These were regression tests actually. So right, and we're using resize window.resize2 in order to resize the window to get these regression tests to see how things look on mobile, right? Let's see how things look on tablet. and then right eventually on desktop, right, whether if we saw on full screen, right, where those buttons came together, which was really nice, right? And that's only the speed, right? And we're going to be able to use the Ruby sleep method in order to kind of like slow things down, because we could just see with speed just how quickly that once those pages get loaded, right, it just goes through those tests, right? Even IE, right? As you can see, make sure that drop down was working. You're able to click on that drop down and verify that the value that was supposed to get from that drop down was going to be the correct drop down. And if that wasn't going to be the case, right, it would close. That this all happened so fast with Capybara. That's what I just want to really go over this E2E. This is a very good E2E framework, which you're waiting for that page to load. That's all right, right? And that is going to be a sleep function. I just wanted to show, right, that it would actually go in light seconds. As you can see, that form was filled out very, very quickly. But right, I just want we use the sleep method there in order to indicate that, right? And even on Internet Explorer, right, the driver is sometimes not enough. The Capybara is just the end that meets, it's the tie that meets those two ends. Very, very nice, right? Like write it quickly, like, this is like, so it's very, so I really just like the speed and the quickness of that. It really just going through these browsers even faster than any user would, but you just know it's really the same result. Right, you can see I didn't receive any files. I hit the submit button, even though we're supposed to upload. Right, you can see that navigation. Right, a split second because I had to sleep it. I think about Louis pet peeve was I should have been more prepared for this video, but honestly, you could just see I didn't really prepare because Capybara is too fast. It's too fast, so you can always slow it down with the Ruby sleep method. You could see, you're able to stop on a dime. You're able to stop an aisle. You see something. Where if there's like no sleep method in there, then that would not be the case, right? So obviously, that test failed, right? We can see that test failed because we probably gave it a file, and Ruby wasn't able to find that file. It's going to be very interesting. It's not only able to find any of the files, right? That was probably just an error on my part, but you could just see that if those tests fail, right, it was able. You saw that context menu wasn't able to upload properly. You can see if those tests fail, then it will cancel at that point. It's supposed to cancel. Very nice. Right now, we see we get that submission successful. All right, it's an error response, right? Obviously, I didn't implement the Dropbox API correctly, very interestingly, but we'll see what's going on with that. Right, but we just get to, it will let us know, right? We get take a look at our app, right? It'll let us know that, hey, we made a mistake, right? And then just as soon as like as the end user E2E gets to the loading page, right, already hits the file button ready to go, but right here it can't find the file. I really just wonder what the error is at this point. Right, so we're able to see that, right, it's going to give us some time. We just try to figure out what's going on, right? And if it wouldn't just immediately fail, like you just see here, after that speed of it, we're retrying and retrying, right? It's just waiting, trying to figure out what's going on, right? And then sometimes you could take a look at the test, but before you scroll back, it might head over to the next test, right? So it kind of ended, right? Sometimes you want to check, right? API Dropbox, right? So it looks like this service is down. If I might have been disconnected, let me see if I got disconnected from the internet. Right, so now what we did was we were taking a look, right? So first time we clicked, we chose a file too big. We might have gotten an error. Now we're getting this error response, right? So right now you can see from our test, right, that if there's a failure in the upload, we don't want to say HTTP error response not successful, right? Because in our Angular code, if you can see here, we kind of we return that error when I was just supposed to handle the error here, right, we would actually go ahead and say, we'd actually I'm gonna go ahead and yeah, I think you could do an array here where you actually would go ahead and end up saying mission failed, please check your internet connection, right? And then we would try to go if result equals array, right? Right. Obviously, that's not how to do, right? So result at index 0, or like result or type of result equals array. Let me actually call it by class name. Yeah, you gotta. It always thinks it's going to return a string. Like this is the thing about TypeScript when we deal with this. Yeah. So one thing. Oh wow. All right. So obviously, with the new update with TypeScript, they're getting way too strict with the types. The any convert, it's really started to disregard and override the any conversion, which I'm starting to see here. Right. I'm going to try to get to the bottom of that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say if answer at index 1 at index 0, right, is equal to the string fail, right? We're just going to go ahead and return like so. Right. So our E2, we saw her E2E test updated, and we really just want to see what happened to the Dropbox API. But that is terrible. Right. That is terrible. Definitely want to that's terrible on TypeScript, just to cause an issue like that, right? That's clearly not the type. I understand it doing a lot, but it's clearly not the type, right? And I see TypeScript come out a lot here and there, but they're just doing too much, right? That any type is very, very important. Probably I got to use the capital T type, and we're just gonna see again, right? If all right, so before, right, the network. Let me see if I was able to save the net. Now I wasn't able to save. The name wasn't resolved, right? Right now, the API wants to go ahead and work again. That's very nice, right? And then what we can do to test that, right? Because we've made our edit, and we could do to test that, right? Say we don't want to go through all the tests, we could go ahead and say, trying to pass a little hash in Ruby, right? Because if you try to pass it in those brackets, right, it's going to think it's a proc. And we don't want it really to think it's a proc. I wish it didn't think it was a proc, but that's how we just go ahead and pass it with the commas. I'm definitely fine with that, right? So now, say we're not really interested in running these tests. We just want to look at right. We just want to look at that file upload test, right? We can go ahead and do is we could go ahead pass the hash skip equals true on those features and those scenarios, right? Put the scenario in its own feature, right? And thanks for opening that block for me, right? And then we could run our test again and see what happens. Just got that full screen. It's interesting, right? Something failed there. And then I think what it is, all right, so where it wasn't able to find one file, but now it's able to find this one. waiting for that submission, right? And then I think, yeah, I think so, right? So there's an error there, right? So it might be the Dropbox API, or just might be an error in the where I wrote that code. Either way, those tests are going to go through. But definitely want to get to the end of this problem, make sure everything is working well. All right, and one file. Now you can see that here, right, we uploaded a file. So obviously that Capybara is working well. And then it's our Dropbox API, which might be an issue, right? Very good about E2E because it leads us to know about issues that we otherwise might not have known about. Go ahead and close this. All right. Right. So which definitely wanted to see if it missed it, right? I think what happened here. Yeah, I think what happened here, right? We have like an error, right? We try to give a bad value that's actually not there. And right, we try to catch it, right? Because it's supposed to be a simple string, right? That's going to be it's actually taken care of in our test module, right? Definitely important in that. But then right, the actual failure, that UI success, they include that test file name to be truvy, right? And then included wasn't the case, got false, right? And right, so that means it wasn't uploaded. Probably was a situation where it was a situation where Dropbox wasn't able to properly upload, right? And then we have another situation where user selected the end user selected a file that it didn't exist, right? So Capybara is really used to show us in detail, and then we could just definitely. And what I like about Capybara, it kind of like pinpoints where something's going wrong, right? So if you definitely you're looking at a browser, right, 1.1, 1.2, right? This is Safari, this is Internet Explorer according to that list, right? That we have list of browsers that we want to go through, right? We're going to take yeah, we want to take Edge, Internet, and Selenium. We saw on those old browsers, right? Firefox, of course, everything's going to work well, fine. But say if we had Edge and Internet Explorer, right, you could see what's going on. We could see if that file API is not working, right? We have to use a different file API to better retrieve those files that we're working with, right? Definitely with Internet Explorer, always there's just going to be issues. Always there's going to be issues, right? So, um, yeah, I know that the file was uploaded, right? But the Dropbox API it might not have wanted to take them, might not have wanted to upload it as well. And then I just want to point out with Internet Explorer and Edge, probably what would have happened is we actually go and look in our code, right? We kind of use a newer API for file uploaders, which is I want to point out, which is x dot array buffer, right? So we're having a promise, right? We convert. So this is how you convert a promise to observable in Angular. Everyone's looking with the from operator, right? We convert it to a promise, but in Internet Explorer, right? That API is not available, and Edge that API is not available. So we want to go ahead and maybe want to go ahead and use the reader, right? We want to use the reader API, and then reader equals new file reader, right? And then we want to use the reader dot onload dot onload equals the function equals so on so, right? I want to say let reader, right? TypeScript is being very strict, and then onload, and then from there, right, we're going to have our array buffer or binary data to go ahead and work with and upload. As you can see, that's our result, right? Right, so reader onload, right? Instead, maybe we could probably could use from on the callback. That'll be super interesting. Or if you actually have an error, but definitely this is a synchronous process. So right, to deal with those browsers. So right, you can see there's a lot of insight that we can get on our testing as well as our um actual web app with Capybara, and definitely when it comes and really how it stands up from other E2E frameworks is that speed, and as well as the simplicity and ease really comes through. Really comes through, and you're really not asking yourself, is there an issue with the framework, the Capybara, the E2E framework, right? You really kind of just know that the issue is actually really stems that, right? Because if you actually look at the trace logs, if you could take a look, right, it kind of like points out where things are, right? Expect that UI, it really just gets to it. It really just tries to point things out for you, gives you a nice backtrace. Really just kind of like points to, like, really just circles. It really circles, really finds that needle in the haystack when it comes to issues with your E2E. And you could go out and hammer out in your code because you really just recognize where that's coming from. That's if, right, the web application code is built properly, and it's always going to be built properly when you're working with Angular, right? There's a lot said there, but there's just a lot of excitement, also Christmas, right? So it's just a lot of excitement just when you want to get in detail and share everything with you guys. So thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.